God, touch me in this hour. A prayer for healing, freedom, and peace. There are hours when the heart begins collapsing before the body does. Some people are carrying pain that does not leave and still have to act like they are fine. Some are waiting on test results and feel fear burning inside them. Some can barely breathe at home because family tension has made the room feel heavy. Some are still hurting from words they cannot forget, from silence that still cuts, from a relationship that ended but did not stop hurting. Some wake up already under financial pressure. Some are worn down by thoughts that never stop and a weight they cannot fully explain. The deeper problem is not only that pain exists, it is that pain presses into the center of a person. Physical pain reaches into the heart. Pressure in the heart darkens the mind. A darkened mind shakes the emotions. Worn-out emotions tighten the body again. That is why people do not suffer in one corner of life. They start feeling heavy all over. So before we go any farther, we hold on to the word of the Lord. In Luke 4:18, Jesus says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, to set at liberty them that are bruised." This is not a distant promise. Jesus still does not turn away from broken hearts. He still comes near to those who feel pressed down. And even when everything is not fixed quickly, he does not leave his people alone. If some part of your life still has not changed, that does not mean you have failed. If you are still here, still reaching toward God, still trying to make it through this hour without giving up, that matters. Endurance is not proof that God has forgotten you. Sometimes endurance is proof that grace is already holding you together. Some victories are loud and visible. Others look like simply not collapsing when everything in you wanted to give way. Heaven does not despise that kind of endurance. Pain does not strike one area of life. It makes the whole person heavy. Pain does not always arrive the same way. For some, it begins in the body. A symptom lingers. Weakness stays. Fatigue settles in. What looks small to others can throw an entire day off balance. For others, the pain is waiting for results, waiting for healing, waiting for some answer after praying and hoping for so long. The mind starts moving ahead of reality. Nothing has been confirmed, yet fear is already writing its own story. For some, the weight lives at home. Family strain makes the very place that should feel safe feel tense instead. For others, the wound is relational. Betrayal, neglect, rejection, or disappointment stays under the skin and keeps speaking long after the moment has passed. For many, money pressure follows them through the whole day. Bills do not only affect a budget, they affect breathing, sleep, and energy. And for others, the pain comes as anxiety that will not fully let go. Nothing dramatic may be happening in the room, yet the heart remains unsettled and the mind will not slow down. One of the hardest pains of all is praying while nothing seems to change quickly. You have asked, you have waited, you have tried to stay faithful, yet the situation still looks slow and the weight still feels real. That kind of pain can wear down not only your strength, but your expectation. It can make you afraid to hope too openly because disappointment has already cost you so much. All these forms of suffering look different on the surface, but inside they do something similar. They spread. Pain rarely stays in one place. When the body hurts, the heart sinks. When the heart is burdened, the mind darkens. When the mind darkens, the emotions grow fragile. When the emotions wear down, the body carries even more strain. That is why people do not simply have a problem. They begin to feel heavy as a whole person. And you need to hear this clearly, that heaviness is not proof that you are weak. It may simply mean you have been carrying too much for too long. The deeper problem is not only that pain showed up, it is that pain begins pressing on the center of the person. Once the center is burdened, even simple things begin to feel costly. That is why understanding the pressure beneath the surface matters so much. Pressure settles in the center and spreads into the mind, emotions, and body. Suffering usually overtakes a person more quietly than expected. At first, it looks like one hard thing, a diagnosis, a loss, a financial burden, a relationship strain, a season that will not turn. But over time, that outward problem does not stay outside. It moves inward. It starts pressing on the center of the heart, and once that happens, the weight changes character. It is no longer just something you are facing. It becomes something that begins shaping how you think, feel, and move through the day. Human beings do not break in separate compartments. Body, thoughts, emotions, and spirit are deeply connected. If the body is in pain long enough, courage weakens. When courage weakens, thoughts drift toward fear. When fear takes over thought, emotions become easier to shake. When emotions stay strained, the body holds even more tension. So what began as one burden becomes a pattern that touches everything. That is why pressure is so dangerous. It does not usually destroy a person in one dramatic moment. It slowly rearranges the inside. Things you used to manage now overwhelm you. Small comments stay with you too long. Rest does not feel like rest. The body is tired, but the inside stays tight. The mind keeps moving, yet cannot find clarity. Often the hardest part of suffering is not only the event itself, but what it does afterward. Pain is hard, but the uncertainty of how long it will last can be harder. A wound hurts, but the version of yourself that appears after the wound can feel even more unsettling. That is what pressure does. It moves from the event into the center and starts pressing on the whole person. If your mind still races, if your body still tenses, if your emotions still swing, that does not mean God is far away. Some pressures do not break overnight. Some wounds recover slowly. Slow does not mean abandoned. It means this is the place where Jesus must meet you deeply. And when he meets you there, he does not only address the symptom, he addresses the place where the burden has been sitting and spreading for far too long. Jesus comes straight into the pressed down center and begins restoration. When a person has been under pressure for a long time, the first thing that begins to disappear is not effort. It is expectancy. You may still pray, still keep going, still do what needs to be done, but inside, something starts whispering, this may never really change, this may simply be how life will feel. That is what prolonged heaviness does. It does not only wound, it closes the center. But Jesus comes precisely to people in that condition. He does not come only for the already steady, the already bright, the already restored. He comes for the brokenhearted and the bruised. He comes for the person who still shows up, but no longer knows how to hope the way they once did. His presence is not a distant encouragement shouted from far away. It is his nearness entering the very place that has been carrying too much for too long. This matters because restoration does not begin when you finally pull yourself together. Many people think healing will start once they become stronger, more composed, more disciplined, more spiritual. But a burdened heart knows real restoration cannot be forced by willpower. The gospel is not, be stronger. The gospel is, Jesus comes near. He sees where the collapse began. He knows what has been bruised, what has been draining you, what has made your inner world feel shut down. He does not brush past it. He does not look at your wounds and simply say, you'll be fine. He enters the place where you have kept functioning while slowly shrinking inside. So even when outward changes are slow, inward restoration may already be starting. God often begins before results become visible. He starts by touching the places that have been locked up, worn down, and pressed inward for too long. And if the process feels slow, that does not mean his companionship is slow. He is present before the results show. He is near before clarity comes. Once Jesus enters the center, pressure cannot keep ruling you the same way forever. The outside may still look unfinished for a while, but the inside has already begun to answer to a different presence. Where the hand of the Lord touches, long-standing chains begin to lose their strength. What crushes a person is not always the original event. Often, it is what the event becomes after it settles inside. At first, it was a wound, then it became a pattern. At first, it was fear, then it became a voice. At first, it was one hard season. Then it started shaping how you saw tomorrow, how you interpreted silence, and how you spoke to yourself. That is when a burden becomes a chain. Chains do not always look dramatic. Sometimes they look like anxiety that always reaches for the worst outcome first. Sometimes they look like discouragement that makes every possibility feel fragile. Sometimes they look like shame that keeps replaying old failures until grace feels small. Sometimes they look like control, the desperate need to hold everything tightly because letting go feels dangerous. Sometimes they look like quiet surrender, the kind that still says prayers but no longer expects much. What makes chains so dangerous is that they slowly start feeling normal. Constant tension begins to feel like personality. Fear begins to feel like wisdom. Self-condemnation begins to feel like humility. But Jesus does not confuse bondage with identity. He does not look at your fear and say that is simply who you are. He comes to set the oppressed free. We need to be honest here. Freedom does not mean every circumstance disappears at once. A body may still need time to recover. A relationship may still need time to heal. Financial strain may still be present tomorrow. But freedom does mean something real. What has been ruling you does not get to rule you the same way forever. The fear may still knock, but it no longer owns the whole house. The grief may still ache, but it no longer gets the final word about who you are. That is where change becomes tangible. The presence of God begins interrupting the old pattern. Pain no longer interprets everything without challenge. Anxiety is no longer the loudest voice in the room. Shame no longer gets to define the whole story. And even if the process is gradual, gradual does not mean absent. What the Lord touches does not remain untouched. When those chains begin losing strength, peace can enter the space they once occupied. The peace of God is not a reward that comes after everything is fixed. It is evidence that God is near. Most people assume peace comes last. After healing, then peace. After resolution, then peace. After the pressure lifts, then peace. But that is not always how God works. The peace of God does not wait at the end of the road like a prize for the fully restored. It often comes as proof that God is already present in the middle of the struggle. This peace does not deny reality. It does not ask hurting people to pretend they are fine. It enters the place where reality is still real. It comes while the body is still healing, while the family tension is still unresolved, while the bills are still there, while the heart is still recovering. That is why this peace is deeper than mood. It is stronger than a passing emotional lift. It is the steadying power of God beneath a still complicated life. When that peace begins to work, something changes. The problem may still be present, but it stops swallowing every part of you. Fear still rises, but it no longer drags the whole day behind it. Thoughts still come, but they do not carry you off as quickly. Tension still shows up in the body, but underneath it, there is a growing awareness. I am not alone in this hour. That is why some people can honestly say, the situation is still hard, but I am not the same inside it. Outward reality may not have fully shifted yet, but inward order has started returning. And this peace does not mean your earlier pain was exaggerated. The pain was real, which is why the peace that meets it is real too. This matters even more when recovery is slow. Slow progress is not spiritual failure. Daily endurance can still be grace at work. God's peace helps a person breathe again before every answer has appeared. It is not something you manufacture. You receive it by letting God be present even in the unresolved parts. Peace does not erase the struggle, but it keeps the struggle from owning your whole inner life. If it is not resolved quickly, that does not mean you have failed. One of the most exhausting parts of suffering is not only the beginning of it. Sometimes the harder moment is later, when enough time has passed that you expected more change by now. You prayed, you cried out, you held on, yet the body still heals slowly. The relationship still feels strained. The heart is not fully steady. That is where discouragement becomes sharp. What am I doing wrong? Why am I still here? If God hears me, why is this taking so long? So hear this clearly. Slow does not mean failed. Delayed does not mean forgotten. Gradual recovery does not mean absent faith. Some wounds are deep enough that they take time. Some situations are complex. We do harm when we turn every slow season into a verdict against the one who is hurting. Sometimes the opposite is true. Continuing to rise while still heavy can be a profound sign of living faith. Beginning the day while still carrying pain can be courage. Turning your face back toward God while still confused can be real trust. Immediate change is easy to recognize, but hidden faithfulness matters too. The grace that keeps you from collapsing completely is still grace. The mercy that keeps you praying one more day is still mercy. And endurance is not pretending. You may still cry. You may still have weak days. Some mornings you may not have many words. Some hours fear may feel louder than faith. Yet if you keep turning back to the Lord, that endurance is not empty. God sees it. More than that, He is not waiting at the end of the process before He joins you. He walks with you in the unresolved time itself. He is present when you wake up tired, when pressure follows you into ordinary tasks, when anxiety returns, when healing feels incomplete. He is present on the days that feel faithful and on the days that feel fragile. So do not call yourself a failure because the process is taking time. This hour may still be difficult, but it is not God-forsaken. God does not only give results. He walks with you through the daily hours that lead there. People often imagine God's presence in connection with obvious breakthroughs. If something opens, then God was there. If circumstances turn, then God must be moving. But what about the long stretch in between? What about the quiet hours filled with routine, fatigue, bills, conversations, disappointment, physical symptoms, and recurring thoughts? If God is truly with His people, then His presence has to matter in those hours too. Much of life is lived not in dramatic moments, but in repeated, ordinary ones. Waking up already tired, feeling your chest tighten before a conversation, looking at responsibilities you do not feel strong enough to carry, entering your home and sensing the same unresolved tension, having a peaceful moment interrupted by a thought you did not want back. Most people do not collapse only in crisis. They wear down across ordinary time. So the companionship of God must be understood as strength for daily life. That means His presence cannot be measured by feeling alone. Some days He may feel near. Other days you may feel little at all. But God's companionship is not created by your ability to sense it sharply. It remains true even on the days when your emotions are dull, your prayers are simple, and your mind feels crowded. So daily life begins to change. You wake up, and instead of giving your center to the problem first, you offer it to God. You do not have to chase every fearful thought to its final conclusion. You can pause and bring it to the Lord. Even physical reactions can become places of surrender. When the chest tightens or the shoulders harden, there is a deeper question beneath the body's response. What is gripping the center right now? Fear, control, old pain? God's companionship meets you there. That means daily faithfulness is not only about enduring major trials, it is also about returning the center to God again and again in the middle of normal life. And this companionship matters when a struggle repeats. The same fears may return, the same concerns may show up again. But repeated struggle is not proof that God has stepped away. Recovery is not always linear. Sometimes you feel strong and then unexpectedly weak. Sometimes peace feels steady in 1 hour and hard won in the next. God does not drop a person because the curve is uneven. He walks the curve with them. That is why his companionship is more than comfort. It is practical strength for daily endurance. True rest begins not when everything is over, but when you place yourself in God's hands. Most people define rest as the absence of trouble. No pain, no anxiety, no unfinished business, no pressure. Only then, they think, will rest finally be possible. But life does not usually unfold that neatly. Some pains are long, some relationships heal slowly, some answers do not come quickly. So the rest God gives cannot simply mean that every burden has disappeared. Real rest begins when you stop trying to carry every burden as though everything depends on your grip. It begins when you take the pain honestly to God instead of pretending it is smaller than it is. If the body hurts, you bring the hurt. If family tension is crushing your peace, you bring that. If your heart is still bleeding from what someone did, you bring that. If money pressure has turned every morning into anxiety, you bring that. Rest in God is not denial. It is the decision to stop carrying alone what was never meant to be carried alone. That changes the center. Before, you believed you had to hold everything tightly or everything would collapse. But the tighter you held it all, the more tense the body became, the more crowded the mind became, the more burdened the heart became. So God teaches us not only how to endure, but how to release. He loosens the clenched hand and teaches the soul to trust his hand instead. This kind of rest is practical. You may still have appointments, conversations, and responsibilities ahead. But inside, something changes. The center is no longer leaning only on itself. It starts leaning on God. Fear may still appear, yet it does not get to determine identity. The body may still feel weak, yet the soul begins remembering, God is still with me here. Rest does not remove responsibility. It changes the way responsibility is carried. A tired person can still enter rest. A slow healing person can still enter rest. A person who is not all the way through the burden yet can still enter rest, because the doorway into that rest is not perfection, it is presence. God is with you while the weight is still real. That is why rest becomes possible. Rest is not the reward for finally becoming untouchable. It is the mercy of being held while you are still tender, still healing, and still on the way. Final conclusion. Even if it is not over yet, God is walking through this hour with you. Pain does not come in only one form. It may be physical weakness, family strain, relational heartbreak, financial pressure, inner anxiety, or the ache of praying while nothing seems to change fast enough. And pain does not stay in one corner of life. It presses on the heart, darkens the thoughts, drains the emotions, and burdens the body. But that is not the end of the story. Jesus enters the burdened center. He does not avoid the wounded heart. When his hand reaches what has been bound, every circumstance may not vanish instantly, but the burden does not keep ruling the same way forever. That is where freedom begins. Then peace begins to enter, not as a final prize after everything is solved, but as living evidence that God is already near. Slow change is not failure. Delayed relief is not abandonment. Endurance can still be success in the eyes of heaven. And above all, God is not with you only after the answer arrives. He is with you before it, while it delays, and while you are still learning how to stand in this hour. He is with you in the unfinished middle, where so much of real life is actually lived. That means this hour is not empty. It is inhabited by the faithfulness of God. So the place you are meant to reach is not the place where every burden has disappeared. It is the place where you entrust your whole self to the God who has not left you. That is the holy turning point of this message. Not pretending nothing hurts, but deciding that what hurts will be carried with God and not apart from Him. We do not begin to rest because everything has been resolved. We begin to rest in the God who refuses to leave us alone. And when His presence becomes the place where we lean, even an unfinished life can begin to breathe again. It is okay if everything is not finished yet. The Lord will not leave you alone in this hour. He is with you today, holding you, keeping you, and walking with you to the end. So in this hour, place every weight in His hands and rest in Him.